So I have a problem. It was something that I could have prevented when I first opened the studio. Let me show you. So this is my ISO booth. Got microphones in here for singing, but it's also a cab room. And I'm out of inputs. When we built this place with very minimal stuff to start with. For one, the studio used to stop right here at this beam. So the studio was just this. I need these 2 rooms. And really at the time, I was limited by my interfaces that I could afford. So I only had 24 studio lines total. 16 in the main room, and then 8 that were split between these 2 rooms. 1 was a return, and then each room got 3. I've since outgrown that many times over, and I'm normally running lines all over the studio to get extra stuff in these ISO booths, but today we're gonna fix that problem, because Daddario sent me a bunch of stuff to do it. Oh, by the way, this video is sponsored by Sweetwater. They did provide me all the Daddario stuff that I needed to make this happen for this video. Thank you, Sweetwater. I'll put links to everything down below. Let's get back to it. So before we start here, Daddario sent me a bunch of cables, strings, all sorts of stuff to make this happen. My stash of guitar strings over here is just covered in Daddario. And not just that, but if we look over here, in the main room, what's that down there? A Daddario stage box. I've been using these things for a minute and I love them. So I was stoked when they offered to send me another one to put in my cab room. So now I can have as many of these things set up as I want. As many mics in here, up to 8. And then still have 3 for my vocals, which was the intended purpose of this room in the first place. So now this place got a whole lot more flexible. There's a lot more I can do with this room. Let's get to it. So if you know the channel, or if you watched for any amount of time, you'll know I'm very much, how do these things work in the real world? And when it comes to a company like Daddario, it is super interesting to me, the depth that this company has. I realize mainly what we're doing is wiring up cables here and setting this up for a new guitar thing. But I come from the world of playing guitar. I was a session guitar player for a long time. I'm not nearly as good as I used to be, but I've played a ton of strings. I hold 2 or 3, I think 1 may be defunct at this point, but I hold 2, if not 3, string endorsements from different companies that I won't name. I am not endorsed and never was by Daddario, but ever since they came out with them, even with my endorsements, I was buying NYXLs to put on all of my instruments, except for my flat wounds. I buy labellas for those. So here's what we're gonna do. Because I wasn't totally sure on the run from the control room to the ISO, we have 2 cables, one 50-foot, one 25. And by the way, I've upped my pocket knife game since the last time we talked. So what do you do when you have 2 DB25s that you need to put together? They're both male. That doesn't work. Hang on. Hey. Obviously it's not super ideal to use a joiner like this, but I have them in different places in the building. It really doesn't cause a whole lot of issues. It's a point of failure for sure, but if it's in a fixed position, if you're careful about how you hang it, it's gonna be fine. Now, if you're anything like me, I don't think we're fully aware of everything that Daddario makes. And originally, they were just gonna send me some strings. But I was like, well, what if I do literally everything Daddario? What does that look like? What does it look like to use the cables, to use the snakes, to use the strings, to use the instrument cables? And these things are surprisingly, like, these are built. And mic cables. Not a whole lot of companies you can go to for a one-stop shop. This kind of a thing, the stage boxes, the DB25s, let's get this rolling. When I first put together the studio, it was definitely bootstrapped with whatever I could get my hands on at the time. The The cables that I put in the walls, pretty high quality, but the thing I didn't anticipate with that, once they're in the walls, you can't get them out. So any amount of upgrading is done. That is one thing that I've learned. If I do this again, everything's gonna be surface mounted for multiple reasons. Troubleshooting is a big one. So what I plan to do with this, I'm gonna go into the Switchcraft patch bay in the control room, come out through the wall, up along the ceiling, and then I'm gonna drop into the room somehow. I'm probably gonna have to drill a hole, and then I can attach the snake once it's inside the room. And that gives me 8 more lines that I can do whatever I want with, and they're not just XLR, they're combi jacks. So if I want to, I could have lines, which is actually gonna be super helpful because I'm just now thinking about this. There are a ton of situations where I do need XLRs, but having combi jacks, I have a fair amount of sessions where people are coming in and they're doing like voice actor talent, so there's a producer in there, so feeding stuff back, getting iPad lines run so that they can hear it, so that there's a director line that's also recorded. It's just helpful to be flexible, and this box is gonna do a lot of that for me. It's not gonna stay in the walls like the thousands of dollars that I spent, and these cables are never gonna move. So I'm definitely finding this room to be an interesting challenge. It's got my vocal mics, got cabs, and I just didn't have a way to plan for what I was going to use this thing for in the future. What I'd love to have is this box somewhere in the back here. So we can run the lines up along the ceiling here, maybe even through into the lobby. I could probably pop out a tile and then put a hole towards the back of the room, which is going to be probably the most ideal situation. It's been a few weeks now, and the room has been wired. It's been working fantastic. And I've been using daddario strings on everything I can slap them on. I'm not mad about it. My favorite ones, not being a bass player, I'm not super into thinking about what to put on my bass, but what I did notice, the last few sessions, we've had NYXLs on the basses, and they just cut right through the mix, and not an abrasive way, but a very useful way, and the bass just sits. By the way, for those who are saying this is just shill sauce, one of the very first videos that I ever put out, I sat right on the other side of this window and talked about how much I like these strings. Hey guys, Resident Loser Jeremy here. Today I want to talk about a few things that preparing to go into the studio as an artist, as a band, if you're just going to the studio. And while you're here, why don't you make sure you got a fresh set of strings? I like NYXLs. That was years ago, before anyone was watching. These phospho-bronze high strungs, I am in love with high stringing or Nashville stringing some guitar in a session and just burying it, because everybody's like, how are your guitars so thick? This is how, both in the acoustic and in the electrics. It just sits in a mix and it can lift a part out. And if you've never done Nashville strung stuff, highly recommend it. Easiest way to like thicken things like crazy. So tiny.
Tell me what you know.
Without getting into the weeds of using 12 strings, and if you have an extra guitar you can just slap stuff like that on, holy cow, chef's kiss. Now if there's one thing true about recording guitars, it doesn't matter what I do here. It doesn't matter what I do here, miking these up however I want. I could put the nicest mics on your acoustic, but it won't matter if the silly thing won't stay in tune to begin with, or if a string is constantly failing. What I'm looking for at the bass level from a consumable standpoint from a guitar is predictability and dependability. let's just plop down right here. Now, you guys have heard me talk about this before. I'm a big fan of problem solving. Most of what we do is fixed at the source, and we can totally agree that most of the bad experiences, at least that I've had in the studio, have come from instruments in disrepair. Drums that need new heads, guitars that need new strings, basses that please just put a new set of strings on them once. And I've played so many strings. I'm not sure I buy into the huge differences between string tensions other than just its playability in your hands and what works for you as a player. And having played a ton of strings and been endorsed by them, what I appreciate about using daddario stuff is that it's super consistent. If you put it on, you know what you're gonna get. It's very predictable, the outcome that you're gonna get, which I highly appreciate in a setting like this where we're trying to be as controlled and expected as possible. The durability on these things and the lifespan on these strings is really cool, especially when you're having people slam on them as hard as we were. And having the flexibility of being able to do weird string gauges, Nashville stuff, which please try it if you never have. It's so cool. Thanks to daddario for sending all this stuff. Thank you, Sweetwater, for sponsoring the video and allowing me to do these weird experiments. If you guys like videos like this, hit the like button, hit subscribe. If you're interested in the band, there's a lot more stuff coming with them. Josh Powell, go check them out. Killer band, check them out on Spotify. All the stuff we were doing right now is unreleased as of late, but if you want to play with these files, they will be available on the Patreon. I'm Resident Loser Jeremy, and I'll see you in the next one. Wait, go change your strings. Okay, bye.